identity and data marketing use cases. We have some very lovely guests on the call today with us as well. I'll introduce myself very quickly, and we'll go around the virtual table. So my name is Phil Raby. I am the general manager of mediarithmics in the UK. For context, mediarithmics is a universal data platform. We provide the best of CDP, DMP, and alliance capabilities. I'll pass it over to Rob, and then we can go around.
Sure, thanks, Phil. So hi everyone, I'm Rob Webster. I'm the founder of Canton Marketing Solutions. We're a consultancy that helps companies upgrade their marketing.
Purnima?
Hi, I'm Purnima Ravi. I manage the integration and an evolution of data management platforms at a global level that will stand the test of time.
Good. And Shez?
Hi, I'm Shez Iqbal. I'm the Director of Publisher Partnerships here at Criteo, looking after Northern Europe, so that's UK, Benelux, and Nordics.
Cool. All right, thanks for that, guys. And I guess without further ado, we'll go into the webinar. I guess the topics. Identity is obviously evolving. This evolution, I guess, has been driven by a number of factors. And I guess if we look at it from a timeline point of view, in 2018 we had, and as everybody on the call knows, we had the GDPR coming into effect. In the same year, we had third-party cookies blocked on Reed and Safari. Firefox as well followed suit in 2019. Chrome announced, I guess, a bit of a bombshell, but I guess we probably, under the surface knew that it was coming, that they will block third-party cookies in 2022. Probably more significant there because it's about 60% of the market. In the interim, CCPA came into effect, which is very similar to the GDPR. And as we know, just around the corner in 2022, third-party cookies will be blocked on Google or Chrome. 2024, we don't know what's coming. We live in or work in an industry that moves fairly quickly. So who's to know what will come in the future? I guess if we just pause very quickly on Google, you know, those announcements are underpinned, I guess, by the Google Privacy Sandbox and Flock and Pledge. So I guess we live in a work in an industry where we probably didn't need any more acronyms, but we do have some more now. Flock meaning the federating learning of cohorts, so fundamentally being able to target users based on a cohort rather than individually. And Pledge standing for first locally executed decision over groups experiment. So put simply, this is the idea or the notion of helping protect user privacy by limiting the amount of data flowing through ad systems and piping, etc. So that's what's kind of happened in the last, I guess, 3 to 4 years from a timeline point of view. I guess where I wanted to kind of kick off, I guess is the first question for the people on the panel was, how will these changes affect identity and data marketing use cases broadly? And I guess what I mean by that is, you know, fundamentally, what do we think will remain the same and what will change? And I'll pass it over to Rob to begin with, if that's okay. Rob, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can see you all, and then we can crack on from there.
No, thanks, Phil. I mean, it's obviously a big change, and I think we shouldn't forget also the changes to IDFA and the IDs in the app space as well. And you know, I really think that by the end of this year, digital marketing will never really be the same again. And I think we have to divide up. So this is not one of those sort of false alarms where things happen and it's sort of a damp squib. Yeah, I really think that there's already been huge change on Safari and other browsers, and we're about to see huge change across the whole ecosystem. I think we have to divide it up into 2 areas, really. We have to divide up into targeting and measurement. And I think that measurement is probably going to be the biggest impact. Yeah, I think we're going to see it's going to be much, much harder for post-impression measurement to work as it has done before, which is going to massively impact how display is viewed by many advertisers. It's not going to completely go, as we can discuss in more detail, but it's going to get a lot harder, and generally the numbers are going to decline an awful lot. Then on the targeting front, which is the area that's got more of the bandwidth, there's going to be a real shift, and I think the amount of retargeting done in the industry will drop. Not to zero by any means, but it isn't going to be, long tail retargeting isn't going to be as easy as it has been for the last 15 years or as prevalent. I think there's going to be a huge impact on sort of, the whole point of one-to-one marketing is going to decline. And we're going to have to really see everyone kind of rejig how they run their campaigns. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see who is prepared, because there's an awful lot of stuff that's known right now, but there's also still an awful lot of unknowns, and things are moving very quickly. And I think we're really going to see over the next 6 months, advertisers, publishers, ad tech companies, those that have a flexible approach and are prepared can still deliver great campaigns and messaging and marketing. Those that are kind of caught behind the curve could really kind of struggle, actually. And coming as it has done after the pandemic, where obviously cash has been constrained, it's harder to work perhaps on some of these projects when you're less able to get together around a table and discuss things. It's put an awful lot of pressure on companies to react at a very, very difficult time. And it makes it a very, very interesting experiment to see which companies can react, and therefore what are the consequences. And overall, I think there's lots of possible things happening here. I mean, there's a real fear that this could actually push more money towards the giants of Google and Facebook. But at a high level, I actually hope that it actually might lead to a better level, better marketing overall. So I'll leave it there for now, so we'll do the detail later. But fundamentally, it's going to be a huge, huge shift across targeting and data and measurement.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I think hopefully we do see, I guess, not that shift, I guess, to more money being spent with Google and Facebook, and innovation in the industry as well. I guess Panima and Shez, do you have any additional thoughts based on what Rob has already said?
Yes, indeed, completely agreed with Rob on an agency standpoint as well. Indeed, there's going to be huge challenges involved on the measurement standpoint, as we're not able to track across platforms. However, let's keep in mind what's not also going to change in terms of use cases, which is there is no end to the first-party cookie, which means we do continue to advise our clients on maintaining a first-party relationship with their consumers, with tracking on the websites. As long as everything is within their own domain and website, this can live on. And this is not something any partner could curtail on. The other thing is also on the targeting that's based on interest and affinities. Though we continue to do the same, it might not be at an ID level, but at a more cohort or group level. But it would remain the same in terms of interest and affinity targeting.
Interesting. And Shez?
Yeah, I have to agree. There's three main perspectives here: the user or consumer, advertiser, and publisher. So from a consumer's perspective, they still want control, choice, transparency, and high-value advertising. Advertisers still need ROI through personalization, but that personalization needs to scale whilst adhering to permissions granted by users. Publishers need better monetization through first-party data protection and improved control over their direct relationships with their readers. And we need to balance all of these whilst balancing the value exchange between stakeholders through trusted first-party data management. Going to the point of the challenge, I think advertisers and publishers need to be able to enrich and grow their access to first-party data while making it portable across the media used to deliver personalized ads.
Absolutely, agreed. And it is interesting as well from my point of view. I think this has been driven a lot by Google under the veil of privacy. But we all know, I think, on the call that they're obviously going to commercially benefit from what's happening as well. So hopefully as well from my perspective that regulation comes in from governments at some point around this. But that's a whole separate panel. I think we could talk about that for hours. We're going to pause here just very quickly for a poll. We'd like the audience just to engage in that on the right-hand side, at the top right-hand side of your screen. I guess what are people most concerned about with the recent changes in identity? And to be clear, we are going to be talking about every single one of these, but I guess it would be good to understand a little bit from the audience what is super important to them as well. So if everybody would like to engage with that on the webinar, if that's good, and submit your votes, I think it's going to work. But this is technically the first time that we've done this live.
No pressure, Phil.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's going to fail, definitely. Okay. Oh, here we go. Things are coming in. Yeah. Okay. Fine. You can vote on it now. Oh, there you go. Oh, cool. The live results coming in. Well, it worked. Good. Yeah, I'm not surprised. There's a lot of results coming in from measurement. That is 64% of the votes that are coming in so far. So pretty strong. So we'll try to spend as much time on measurement. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So measurement has clearly won. Then third-party data capabilities, retargeting, and then frequency capping on that as well. But look, we are going to cover each of those. So why don't we start with retargeting? We obviously have Criteo on the call. Myself, obviously, working at Criteo for a long time. Retargeting is obviously very important to brands and driving performance, and it has been for the last 10 to 15 years. Shez, what is the future of retargeting from a Criteo's lens?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I think the future of retargeting will be broken up into a few things. So firstly, one-to-one won't be the only focus anymore. Like Punima said, cohort advertising will be much more relevant, and especially contextual for web and app. Whilst I don't have a crystal ball, the industry does seem to be leaning towards 3 potential scenarios for personalization that are likely to coexist. So despite user concerns over third-party cookies, users will continue to demand and expect personalization. However, they want more control and choice over their ad experience. Advertisers may continue to target users by providing one-to-one personalization known as user-level targeting. They could also continue to target users based on their interests, so interest group targeting. This will maintain some of the personalization while restricting the ad ecosystem's ability to identify users' individual interests. Or advertisers could use contextual targeting. This means no reliance on users' data delivering ads based on context or page content. For example, advertising plates on recipes.com. Most important is that these continue to give users control of the type of ads they see and a transparent view of how their data is being used.
Okay, interesting. And Rob, what's your view on retargeting? I know that you've over the years had quite strong views about retargeting, I guess. But where do you see that? Where do you see it going?
I think we're in for a huge change, right? So in the past, you looked at a pair of shoes on an advertiser's site, and you would see those shoes across a whole plethora of different sites. Now, what that effectively meant was a whole number of different sites effectively had access to that data about your identity and your browsing habits in a fairly unsecure way. And I just don't see that continuing in the new world, partly because of the way technology is changing with browsers, but also the way GDPR works. So retargeting as was isn't going to carry on. But that doesn't mean that there won't be retargeting. There's obvious cases where retargeting will still work. So within a logged-in environment, something like Facebook, where people are using email address level data, account level data, hopefully with consent, there will be that level of targeting still possible. So what I think you'll have is retargeting happening on different logged-in ecosystems. I think Phil, you call them private gardens in your mediarithmics language, but the point remains, right? You can imagine a world where the Ozone project, using some of the data, allows for ozone retargeting on its publishers. Obviously Facebook, other walled gardens, Snapchat, whatever, will allow some level of retargeting, all when they're able to pass consent at an account level. So I think that's a guarantee. And actually, we'll see retargeting in that respect grow to kind of a connected TV world. You can imagine if you're logged into ITV or Channel 4 or any other TV service, there's a chance that you might be retargeted to things where you have shown interest and logged in, and all of that done with consent, which is a much better world. What I think is less clear is what happens to that longer tail. I think there's an argument to suggest, if you read some of the identity players in the market, saying that the ID will live on outside of the Google ecosystem, and that you'll be able to use that for retargeting. Now, that for me has a few implications. One is that how long will Google allow that to happen on its browser when it's not participating? And if that world gets huge uptake and share, will that carry on forever? I personally have my doubts. And also, how will the regulator in the medium to long term allow those IDs to grow? I also, if the regulator has shown there's a way of doing this without the ID, I have my doubts as to how long that is sustainable without a very high level of consent. And actually, I think a lot of the attention here needs to turn to the TCF and the consent framework. I don't see at the moment how it can be strong enough to do that unless you actually have a persistent account level ID. To be able to retarget those shoes, I actually think you'll have to submit your email address and actually click yes, I want to be retargeted those shoes. Which will be a huge change, because that only really means you'll be retargeted with products that you've really chosen to be retargeted by, and therefore being able to kind of get that consent, get that opt-in is going to be a vital part of marketing and content. I think that leads us to a better world, but I do think that we're going to have to relearn how to run this. The way of doing it before, where you just blanket retarget everyone that hits your landing page, I think those days have gone from next year.
I agree on most of those points as well. And to reiterate on that private garden piece as well, I think fundamentally we will see, I guess, larger or even mid-size brands and publishers creating that notion of private garden, as you said. If you're a large electronics retailer, if you're a large grocer with decent first-party data assets, being able to partner with another publisher with decent first-party data assets, where you are still able to make that connection from a first-party ID perspective, as you say, Rob, and retarget users based on selling campaigns to partner brands, for example, so Samsung or P&G, for example. So we think the world is, and those private garden, or the notion of them, are becoming more popular as well, I think, and we think it's pretty exciting because it is providing that, I guess, the buyer with the option of not just using a Google and a Facebook, which has typically been the case, I guess, in the last 10 or so years. But look, we'll put a pin in retargeting because we've got quite a lot to get through, and I know that a lot of people voted for measurement as well. So what's going to happen with measurement? I guess we've lived in a world, it's been frustrating for me, and I think it's been frustrating for a lot of people, that last click attribution has been the commonplace for so long. The end of the third-party cookie is obviously going to have an impact on measurement and attribution. Panima, what's your view from Havas's perspective?
So great question. So indeed, what you first talked about are the different types of modeling as to attribution. Maybe last click, maybe first click, and multi-touch attribution. It's very important in the industry to have this multi-touch attribution, which is indeed the challenge if we are not able to track it across platforms. How do we overcome this? One is, of course, testing and learning in the new framework of the Privacy Sandbox as to what it has to offer, through their APIs as to what we can do about it to track it even at a cohort level. The second is also to rely on some models that have been tried and tested, maybe marketing mix modeling, and also some newer attributions such as incrementality, attention, to also measure what is happening with our marketing spend.
Okay, interesting. It's certainly interesting to find out what's happening agency side as well, because those are obviously conversations you're having all the time with clients, and econometrics has obviously been quite central to that over the last X amount of years. Rob, what are you seeing from your side? You're obviously having a lot of conversations with clients about measurement.
Yeah, and for me, this is probably my favorite area, actually, because, for me, 90% of advertisers, at least, if not 95%, get measurement wrong, very, very badly wrong. I think the greatest trick Google ever pulled was convincing the world that Google Analytics was a fair measurement platform for all media. Guess what? Brand search comes out, number one on that in terms of an acquisition channel, despite the fact the incrementality is, less than 10%. And guess what? Google Analytics won't be that much affected by any of these changes, right? So, quelle surprise. I shouldn't get into any more French now. I'll run out of legs pretty soon. So the web analytics, which unfortunately is still how many companies use to measure media, is still going to work fine. But there's a big question mark over how MTA will survive, because MTA, all the efforts are to stop it being able to measure cross-platform. The question is, will they work? Some MTA systems use things that we can't call fingerprinting to make them work. Or to kind of get around the cookie or the idea issue. will that still be applicable in the future? I think that it will be for a short while, but not for long. And what that means is that a lot of companies have invested a lot of money in expensive attribution systems. Again, they're going to have to start again from scratch.
Mm.
Yeah, if you start with the basis that analytics is a great starting place for measurement. You need to know what's happening on your site and where they last came from. That's a great starting point. But that on its own isn't going to support all of the media buying we want to offer as an industry, and certainly won't support display very well. Yeah, going back to last click only will particularly without the benefit of retargeting as a tactic at such scale, would drastically decrease how much money would be spent on displays as well as paid social. So where does that leave us? I think the logged-in environments have to be a starting point. So Google and Facebook will be able to measure you on a post-impression level and across their whole journey through to sale. And I think this is where data clean rooms come in to then try and push that data through. Now, Google and Facebook are going to struggle to share data together. So again, this is where advertisers are going to have to be very, very clever about how they take that data and how they then try to make sense of it together. How do they kind of dedupe it, if you want to use that word? And then also, what does everybody else do? How does the rest of the 30% of the digital marketing survive in this space? And what I think you're going to end up with is a world where advertisers take all the data they can do into one place. So their analytics data, Google data, the Facebook data, Snap, anything else. They also run experiments a lot, which Pramina mentioned earlier. So yeah, exposure control testing, but also testing on a location level or even on a cohort level. So can we see if we run in that location but not that location, does sales go up? Does visits go up? And I actually think that the smart money right now is combining all of that in a turbocharged form of media mix modeling. Remember, media mix modeling, great for offline for years, but most companies only redo the model every quarter, every 6 months. Yeah, that's not fast enough for today's world. We're just better run a model at least monthly, probably weekly, maybe even daily. So I think there's going to be a huge amount of effort in pushing all of the data into one central place, a cloud environment, to allow for different sorts of modeling to be run at different time increments that suit the media you're trying to measure. And that when you combine that with testing and with exposed control groups at locations and maybe flock levels, we're actually going to end up in a much better place. Because as I said, 90% of advertisers today do it badly anyway. Yeah, they don't even realize that they're not measuring on Apple properly because they're not. If actually we can get to a new world where it's much more based around bringing data together and having experiments and actually respecting the view of those that are running the attribution, we can end up further ahead. But also all of that requires expertise. And therefore the advertisers and the companies that really kind of lean into this are the ones that are going to do well. Those that kind of sit back will just take the analytics view of the world, and I think probably underinvest in their media. Those that can truly understand can get a massive leap forward in what they're doing.
And who is best placed, and this is kind of a Panima and Rob, who is best placed to help with this? And we obviously have lots of consultants. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the consultants, agencies, of course.
Consultants, yeah.
Of course. I knew you were going to say it. That's fine.
And agencies.
Clear. No, look, I think it's an interesting place we're going on that front, and I think as the poll has shown, measurement is a big issue and potentially worry, as you said, Rob. Some of these clients spend years and years and years trying to perfect these models. I think as we move into this new world, I think it's going to be the clients that don't approach it head on are going to potentially find it very challenging in 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, and in all seriousness, I mean, it's whoever has the expertise. Some agencies have invested very heavily in predictive modeling departments. There are lots of companies out there that have lots of resource here. That talent is going to become magnified in its importance. And I think it's how we then recognize that value. And I think automation is so important. We can't afford for people that have been involved in predictive modeling. How long it can take to get hold of a simple file that gives you TV spend by month or by week or whatever. It takes a long time to get hold of. It should be simple, right?
Should be.
And if we can sort out that logistics and kind of give the area respect it deserves, we can really move forward.
Agreed. Okay, we'll put a pin in it because there's also quite a little bit to get through as well. I'll just say to the audience as well, please feel free to ask questions because I can see them in real time on the right-hand side, even if it is going to put me off a little bit. That's fine, I can handle it. We'll move on to the next question, which is third-party data, I guess. What's going to happen to third-party data as we move into this new world? I'll start with you, Shez, actually. What's Criteo's view on third-party data?
So I think if we look into if this is the end of third-party data as we know it, then the answer would be yes, it is. Or to stretch my French, oui. That said, we found that many publishers have preparations in hand to adapt stable and long-lasting alternatives. This is redefining the image of the internet as a safe medium for consumers or readers. We also think that as our industry evolves, so are the strategies for alternative targeting solutions around first-party data, contextual tools, and other PII data signals.
Okay, clear. And I guess I can give my view as well, because I have a very different view, I guess, to you, Shez, which I guess is all right. I think from my perspective, and I guess it would be good to get Panima's and Rob's opinion on this as well. I don't think it's the end of third-party data as such. I think from our perspective at mediarithmics, I guess if you looked at third-party data in the past, there's always been that question mark about the quality of the product that was being purchased, I think, by advertisers for activation and reporting purposes. I guess there were issues around where that data came from, segments potentially being too large to be believable, I guess. I guess now from our perspective at mediarithmics, and as we move into a more complex world, what's likely to happen, I guess, from our point of view, is third-party data will become better. It already is. There's more deterministic IDs available across third-party data sources in terms of hashed emails and mobile IDs. I guess for advertisers, what that means is, as I said, it will become more improved or better for them. It will also, of course, have knock-on effects around price, which is also fine. And I think mediarithmics' view on this as well is fundamentally, I think we need to get away from the view of calling it first, second, and third-party data, and more for data to be measured on qualitative metrics as well, and how this can have a positive effect on purchasing for activation. I'm not sure what anybody else on the webinar thinks, but that's broadly our view here at mediarithmics too.
So I think I've got quite a different take to actually both of you actually. So
good.
First of all, yeah, it's definitely not the end of third party data, right? I mean, honestly, that's crazy. Sorry. Because first party data is great at helping you understand your current customers and your current visitors. But at the end of the day, companies want to grow, and the only way to grow is to know about people that are beyond your four walls and outside of your own environment. And that's what third party data is. Now, it's certainly true that third party data is going through a massive shift right now. I think the days of third party data being bought through an RTB data exchange in a one-to-one basis, that's going through a huge amount of transition because of all of the technologies, as we've said, the whole cross-device world. So the way the third-party data is used today is under huge threat. And if some people would say that that's dying or dead, I don't quite agree, but that's fair enough. But what's instead going to happen is that the value of the data is going to be used in different ways. One possible way is through the new IDs. And that's certainly a route that many are going down. And when there's consent, when that third-party data can be matched to a user again from that logged-in universe, and there's clear consent, that's a very, very good way to do it, right? And maybe it does become second party because you actually have a relationship, a contract relationship with the company, join it up and connect in that fashion. So that's one way of getting data on people beyond your own ecosystem. But also what I think you'll find is that there are a lot of companies out there who are really, really pushing turning data into data around groups, aggregating it a little bit. So how does third-party data work in a flock universe? Can we apply data to the flocks? I think we can. Can we apply data to other groups? It's interesting that IOTA recently have been putting an awful lot of effort into how they can turn their data into a flock style a way of working. And I think as one of the larger data exchanges out there, that's a very interesting idea to go, right, there's a new way of trying to onboard data. Actually one that might work not only in display, but also across different media, across the connected TV, digital at home, potentially the walled gardens themselves of Google and Facebook. I think there's other companies that are pushing a huge amount of effort into Contextual gets a huge amount of billing, and quite rightly so. I think contextual targeting is only going to grow. And if you look at what a company like sort of like 50.io is doing, they're trying to sort of combine audience targeting with a contextual flavor. And I think that's very, very very exciting. But then geodata is going to be massive, right? Because people's behaviours do differ on geo levels. You've only got to look down at any given street to realise that different houses, different streets have different characteristics and behaviours around socio-demographic levels to know that geodata is going to be vital for the future. We've been working with Skyrise Intelligence on that, and you can really kind of see different geo flavors across countries, across the country, and how that will impact performance. And all of these kind of new breed techniques actually, I think, will lead to a resurgence in how third-party data is used, because there's also going to be this kind of hole, right? In the past, when we had the ubiquitous cookie, everyone had data at their fingertips. Now it's going to be harder to get hold of. People actually have to really kind of go back to basics and go, what's available and how does it move the needle? How does it increase your chance of converting? And I think that with a better form of measurement, we can actually, as you say, use data in a better way with a more qualitative basis to go, can I use this to actually increase my chance of reaching my audience? Can I use this to increase my conversion rate? And I think bad third-party data is dead, because there's no point in bad third-party data now. That was kind of been swapped before across the tools. But great third-party data has a bright future.
I agree. And Nima, I know that from Havas's perspective, you leverage quite a lot of third-party data sources. So, what is your view? Do you have a fourth view so we can all be on different sides?
Let's combine all of them together. So, indeed, I guess there is this popular opinion that yes, there are many agencies out there that are spending millions of dollars or euros or whatever local currency on buying third-party data, which is not the case for Havas Media, because we work, as you said, Phil, as well, with business models that are more at a rent, not buy approach, so that we keep tabs on the volatility of these kind of information. Let's also keep in mind that you did rightly say about third-party data, not third-party cookie, and let's keep in mind that not all of these types of data are disappearing. Maybe device IDs might disappear in a few more years. Something would happen to the third-party cookie at the end of the year. But it's important to also remain ID agnostic as to not putting maybe the email on the pedestal tomorrow and then making it the single version of truth. That being said, it's also important to leverage on identity resolution partners that are out there, so that we always have an omni-channel activation of this use of this data. The last being is also the collaboration, as these are our partners, not somebody we just say, okay, give me your data and that's it. We collaborate with them to understand, how is this data collected? How do we evolve this collection of data in the future? That is, as Rob pointed out as well, consented, that can be used at scale, so that this is not something that is wasted over time.
Okay, yeah, no, interesting, and it's interesting to hear your views as well from Havas Media. We'll put a pin in third-party data because that, I think, for the audience, that was kind of interesting based on the poll for them. We're not going to talk about frequency capping, I don't think, because only 2 people voted for that on the whole webinar. So let's move past that one.
It does sound like there's general consensus there. I think you said that there were 4 opinions, but to be fair, if it's the point of, does third-party data exist in its current form in the future? No, it doesn't. No. Quality of third-party data and new forms of third-party data, then I think we've got general consensus there.
Yeah, we do. I think we've all ended up on the same side of the fence, which is good, right? I think we're all in agreement broadly that it's going to change and it's not going to be the same. Which is, and thanks for pointing that out, Shez. So I think we'll move on to consent. I think that's an interesting topic certainly to dive into. Who I'm going to point this at? I think, Shez, what's your view on consent and how that's going to be managed in the new world from a Criteo standpoint?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we at Criteo believe consent will need to be managed through new and innovative ways that are based on consumer trust and permissions. I think Rob mentioned that earlier. With this in mind, you're probably aware that we, along with our industry peers, have partnered with the Trade Desk to help drive the adoption of Unified ID 2.0, building an open source Unified ID for one-to-one advertising. We're in particular providing the single sign-on capability and co-developing a transparency portal to give users unprecedented control over their ad experiences and privacy.
And when is that coming from a Criteo standpoint? Is that in the works? When's that due to be released fully?
No, we're working on that right now. So we are testing in certain markets, but yeah, we're working on that right now. And you can read up on that. There's a blog post by Todd Parsons. There's some stuff on GitHub as well. So yeah, you can follow that through. It's fully open source.
Okay, interesting. And Rob, what's your view on consent? I'll check you in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone really, when the whole idea of having consent for use of data was quite rightly pushed forward, I don't think anybody imagined the mess that would be made of it, frankly. Think about the user experience today, where every time you go to a new site, you're bombarded with overlays asking you to provide your consent, which nobody really wants to read because you want to go and read your content, right? There's a whole mountain of small print. And then if you then click through it, you then get to realize all of the different companies that are then collecting that consent. I mean, from a user experience point of view, I'm not really sure that we've come a long way, right? Because we're actually just bombarding the user with information and not really providing that ability to actually have it. The word informed consent, informed is the key word here. Is the user any more informed today than they were? I would argue not. So I think that the way consent has to work for me is that the consumer has to know who it is that has hold of their data. And in the past, with the way the system worked, that data was often being held by 1,001 ad tech companies the user had never heard of. Companies that maybe we've heard of, but actually many of them, people like us who know the industry well, haven't heard of either. But I think consumers, if they are to trust anybody with their consent on their data, it's with the brands that they operate with, publishers and advertisers. So if they're surfing on a major newspaper site, they may trust that newspaper with their data as a fair value exchange for reading their content. If they're on an advertiser's site, a seller of goods or services or what have you, they may trust them with that data and actually want them to have that data for personalization. We can all imagine that your favorite tech company or sort of laptop or manufacturer or phone manufacturer, you might want them to sort of personalized messaging to you about the latest phones or computers or cool things that they're building. I think it's less likely for washing machine insurance, quite frankly. I don't think you're going to find us providing consent for washing machine insurance companies in quite the same way, because I don't think people want to have that level of personalization as much.
Sure.
So for me, we have to go back to a world where consent is really something that's defined between the individual and the brand, and we have to make it less intrusive. So that people actually want to go and click on providing consent in a normal fashion rather than being bombarded with a click here every 2 minutes. So I'm convinced that the current status quo is only going to last as long as it takes for the regulators to kind of unpick themselves from their own. Regulators right now are also stuck in the pandemic, right? Having to worry about how the different pandemic tracking apps and so on are being used. And that once they're able to then look past that, and as legislation evolves, I'm confident that we'll see an end to this kind of practice. And probably the best practice today on consent actually still is that logged in environment where when you've logged in, you have the chance to trust that brand with your data. Perhaps that's still not informed enough, but that's the best that we have today.
Yeah, no, agreed. And yeah, I agree fundamentally on that value exchange piece as well. From a consent perspective, Panima, do you have any views from Havas and agency land?
Indeed. So consent is not new to us, since regulation bodies have announced that consent is mandatory to collect, especially in the European region. So we are, as an agency, privacy and consent friendly, and privacy and consent first for our clients. Indeed, as Rob mentioned, it is important to maintain this relationship between the individual and the brand, advised by agencies such as Havas Media. What is also important is to establish something that is not just clear consent to all the cookies, but a preference center that people can pick and choose what they are actually opting into, and lowers the amount of opt-outs that might be actually aggregated. To just change the question around, as we saw latest announcements on the flock, is that it's not available for testing in Europe, because is consent to be collected for flocks before it can actually be used by Google is a bigger question, before it can actually be tested and used within GDPR regulated zones.
I mean, I guess it's a part of the shit show of flock, really, isn't it? That they can't do it in Europe, to be quite frank. So it's kind of like typical Google. You know, we'll release this thing, and oh, by the way, we can't release it in Europe. So again, that could be a whole other pod. I'm not sure if anybody has any strong views about that, but it's just a bit of a mess.
Well, it is a mess, isn't it? And I think it shows how this whole piece has been led by the Google privacy team, not by the team that cares about advertising. I've heard some say that they're convinced that there'll be an extension again in early Jan 2022. There won't be, because the Google legal team have said this is happening. So I think anyone holding out for an extension because of some of these problems is, in my view, not reading the runes.
Agreed. We've only got about 10 or so minutes left, because we'll stop at 5 minutes to and give people time to hop onto their next meetings, because we know everybody's busy. I wanted to spend just a couple minutes. You know, we all work on different sides of the fence, right? I guess, you know, ad tech or tech. You know, myself and Shez from a Criteo perspective. You know, we've got agencies on the call as well. We've got consultancies. I guess as we move into this new world with identity, what is the role, or what should be the role of each of the industry players? Who am I going to pick on first? Panima, what's your view on that? Where should you sit in this I guess this context of identity?
So indeed, it's not to sit in one place and not evolve. That is the first thing, is to evolve in things that move along with these changes. It's normal. Marketing keeps evolving. It's not the same since 5 years ago and now. It's to evolve with time and construction of platforms that will stand the test of time and be future-proof. The second is also to advise clients and test these new evolutions that are out there on behalf of our clients, to keep them informed and advise on recommendations to best proof the relationship between the brands and their consumers. The last is, of course, the private or shared gardens that we are trying to establish as well from our partners, so that we establish our own, I would say, data arsenal to be sustainable in the future.
Clear. Okay, that's quite clear in terms of where you guys sit. Shez, what about yourselves? Or Criteo?
I really like that answer from Panima. That's about evolving and moving forward. So, you know, likewise, from a Criteo perspective, we find ourselves in a unique position to help serve as a data steward. So help to protect, monitor, and activate opted-in first-party data across our network. Is this position that enables cookieless targeting and retargeting across our commerce media ecosystem. As such, we're building what we call a first-party media network aimed at balancing the value exchange between stakeholders through trusted first-party data management.
Clear. Okay, interesting. So that's obviously Criteo's view, which is great. Rob, what's your view from a consultancy perspective? Where do you kind of sit in this ecosystem?
I think it's really important for consultants to offer independent and informed advice to advertisers, particularly, but also to publishers. And I think those words are really important: independent and informed, because it's very advertisers are going to get given many opinions from Google and Facebook who tell them how to do one thing, spend more money with them. They will also get bombarded by, sorry to say, Phil, some tech companies who want them to sort of choose their own provider. And some of that advice is good, right? But But the thing is that these companies are very good at stating the great things about their solution and not mentioning any of the risks or any of the gaps, or indeed how they interoperate. And often they kind of disappear when you've actually got to start doing the hard work of actually applying this stuff. So I think advertisers and publishers, what they need actually is help from that's less kind of involved in that front, in that kind of in the heat of it, actually help them work their way through it and come up with the right solution. And I think it's important for the industry too, right? Because we mentioned right at the start, one of the elephants in the room is the growing power of Google, Facebook, probably Amazon as well, and yeah, their influence on advertisers is huge because they have such a hold over them. We all then need to make sure that the education is there to show them there is a better way, and to show them that there's independent ad tech, independent publishers, data companies, all of these other solutions are super valuable and actually help enhance the overall piece. Because it's outside of Gaffer that most of the content is produced and most of the content lives. And therefore, that's why consumers also live, right? And so it's really important that we kind of help provide that advice on how you can access that in the best possible way.
Yeah, interesting, and agree as well. So look, it's interesting to hear it from all of your angles as well. From I guess mediarithmics as a tech provider, my answer I guess is, and I'll wade in and have an answer rather than just sitting on the fence here, revolves more around how brands could work with identity in the new world. So I guess as a brand, you have two options, right? You have option one, which is continue to work with the walled gardens. You have an abundance of first-party data. But of course, there are implications around that as well, around the fact that they don't give too much back, but they like to take. We all know that. Option two is you explore open working, further in the, I guess, the open web, as Rob just highlighted there. A lot of the content is actually on the open web versus the walled gardens. And I think as a tech vendor, and from our perspective as well, you should be providing multiple solutions, which is, we talked about it at the top of the call, helping brands build their own walled and private gardens, and publishers build their own walled and private gardens. Working alongside industry players as well, so the likes of universal or independent ID providers. Panima mentioned that earlier on the call as well, and then working to deploy solutions in line with Google Privacy Sandbox, even if it is, I guess, a little opaque at this point in terms of what that's going to look like in the future. So that's mediarithmics, I guess, standpoint. I'm going to pause there. There's a question that's come in. What were the panelists' views on the new SWAN initiative from PubMatic, OpenX, and others? Do you have a view, Rob, on that?
Honestly, I don't think I've read enough about it to give an informed view right now. So I'm gonna pass on that one. Sorry.
Does anybody else on the call have a view on that as well? I actually don't have a view on it because, again, I haven't read too much about it, but I thought maybe one of you might have. No? Okay.
I think, look, I haven't read into it, but I think any new proposals in identity, anything that can, further the conversation is great, right? So as many proposals that are going to challenge whatever's out there are great to just evolve the industry moving forward. But like the others, I haven't really read into it further, but I've put it down here on my reading list.
Well, they all center around birds.
That's the best thing, right? That's the best thing.
Which is interesting in itself. So sorry for that, for someone in the audience. We don't have too much detail on that.
I'm just reading it now, Phil. It looks like another independent identifier that works across different platforms. So that's great, but again, do we believe in the new ID, and how does that apply to consent? So is it a part of the solution? Yes. Is it going to be the solution? I think honestly that lies with consent of the regulator. And those are the things that we really, and also will Google allow it, or the browser owners allow it? I personally have my doubts on that.
Yeah, no, I agree as well. I agree. But look, last question, and then we'll finish unless there's any other from the audience. It's quite controversial to end on this, but I thought it would be quite interesting anyway. Who will be the winners in this new world, and who will be the runners-up? Because there will be runners-up, of course, right? That's going to happen as we move into this new ecosystem and world. Shez, for you, who will be some of the winners from your perspective?
Well, we're fully supportive of the open internet and working towards solutions for all publishers and advertisers. So with this in mind, we've invested heavily in our core hubs to support mid-sized budgets, and of course have our regional offices to support what you might describe as mature advertisers. So I think if you're thinking that mature advertisers could be some of the winners here, we're set up to support that, but we're also set up to support those outside of that. We spoke about this before, and I agree with, I think, some of your points there, that those not doing something about identity could lose out here. So all organizations need to be ready to take advantage of this shift in the digital landscape. And many have already started to redefine their relationships with consumers through retargeting partnerships and engaging products. But let's be clear, there's still some time, and I hope the work we and our peers are undertaking will offer them support. So in short, it's not great if you've not done anything. I wouldn't call anyone a loser here, but you should probably start thinking over your identity strategy.
Yeah, I was being nice saying runners up, because someone actually just commented on it as well in the comments saying no one remembers runners up. It really is losers, I guess. But we're being...
I wouldn't call them losers either. I'd say no one's losing out here. You've still got an opportunity. There's still time.
What do you think? People will lose out.
What's your...
People will lose out. I mean, unfortunately, I think long-tail publishers are really going to struggle. Long-tail publishers have done very, very well the last 15 years because they've been rewarded for other people's data, in many cases, through the way the RTV works. And I think that's going to reverse. And I think that what's basically happening here is that the world's diverging, because to overcome these issues is becoming more and more complicated. You need to have a consent framework platform that works. You need to have knowledge of new IDs, identity mapping, perhaps, to sort of push data through, predictive modeling is required for measurement. A lot of these fixes require a lot of expertise. So the people that have that expertise, the companies that can get hold of that expertise, I think will really, really thrive. I think for everybody else, though, they're going to go back to the basics. They're going to go back to what's easy. And a lot of it, what's easy, is going to unfortunately be Google and Facebook. So I think, unfortunately, Google and Facebook are going to dominate more than ever before in the small to mid-sized advertiser space, particularly in the next 2 years as it all gets sorted out. Well, exactly. And I think anyone that can kind of offer easy solutions that really work for the long tail, which historically Criteo has, for example, can do very well. But overall, I think for those that want to be at the forefront of this, it's all about leaning in. You need to test. You need to spend time now understanding it, testing it, learning about it, bringing in expertise and help if you need it, and really leaning in, because at the sharp end, if you don't do that and the competitors do, there's a huge competitive advantage to be gained here from being able to do this right.
Yeah, agree on all those points. Panima, do you have a view from Havas?
Yes, absolutely. So indeed, like Darwin's theory of evolution, it's going to be survival of the fittest. It's going to look very different in the future. It's all about, as Rob mentioned, I completely echo on his point on testing and learning. If this is the right moment to do so, and if not, you've not started now, it is the right moment to start, so that we don't wait to cross the bridge when it gets there, as it might be too big a gap to actually cross without having the right material to do so. It's also important to have, I guess, the winners would be the ones who have a direct relationship with their clients and customers to advise them, as we mentioned several times during this panel, first-party data and leverage relationships between brands and their consumers.
Thanks for that, Panima, and I agree with all points, and I think you've covered off all mine as well. We would share, across all three of you, so I don't really need to add much value there. So we do have one question just very quickly that I wanted maybe one of you to answer. Given that consumers don't understand the digital ecosystem, do you think it's ever possible to achieve informed consent? Do you have
it's definitely possible. Whether it's possible at scale is a different question. But I think we can do a much better job than we are today, right? So yeah, we have to work harder at that, right? The whole principle of this is consent. Unless we have consent, the whole principles of GDPR and TCPA kind of fall down, right? And right now, all we're doing with the current status quo is pushing more towards GAFA, which I don't think is a good thing to do. And actually, B, I would say making consent worse, because it's actually now hidden behind walls of jargon, which can't be good.
Agreed. And Panima and Shez, do you have any additional views on that, or broadly agree with Rob?
I broadly agree with Rob. I think it is about being transparent and clear in the language and making sure that users have that ability to see what that consent means. So yeah, it's an education piece, and hopefully that's where the industry is moving forward.
Yeah. Indeed, agreed. I guess it's also the preference center to also be able to opt into different items and also opt out of things that might not be of interest for the individual.
Agreed on all points. And look, we've got 3 minutes left, so we did it within an hour. We had quite a lot to get through. So thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Everybody on the webinar as well. I hope you found it very interesting. Thank you very much to our special guests, Rob, Shez, and Panima. The recording will be available on demand after, so we will be sending that across. And we hope you really enjoyed the session. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays.
Thank you, Phil, for having us.
Cheers, Phil. Thank you all. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.